I'm so excited to be on. Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome. I hope you all are somewhere comfortable, sitting down, ready to watch this wonderful panel today. This is not so much a show as it is a discussion. And we have a lot of good conversation with these three wonderful panelists. It's going to be a learning experience for all of us. So, happy National Deaf LGBTQ Awareness Week. Yay!
Yay!
I really feel good about that because whew, it's been a long time coming to get to 2022. Our lives as LGBTQ, especially being BIPOC elders. And so before we get the ball rolling on this discussion, I would like to ask that all of the people that are watching to please turn off your cameras. You should still be able to see us. We just need you to turn your cameras off. We want to make sure that all of our videos are running smoothly and also make sure your audio is turned off as well, as not to cause any distractions for other people that are listening to the panel discussion today. If you have any questions, please hold them, or you can go ahead and send them through the Zoom chat to Drago. He will compile all of the questions, and at the end of the discussion, we'll have a Q&A, and he will send me those questions, and I will ask the panelists. So hopefully we'll get your questions answered tonight. Again, we are going to have an amazing conversation. And we have some amazing panelists here with us today. So, without further ado, it's really an honor to have this panel discussion because, again, being BIPOC elderly people, we want to honor them. And we want to honor our youth today. And our youth, we're all in a very sensitive position right now with all of the bills being passed, and especially in the schools where our youth are trying to be themselves and go through their lives as they are. And so, they want to get an education without having to worry about all of the other stuff. And so we really want to focus on that. And so now I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to allow you all to get to know who our panelists are. So we're going to start by asking you to introduce yourself, where you're from, your age, and how you identify your intersectionality. Oh, I didn't introduce myself. My apologies. I am Gerald Career. I identify as deaf, Black and Indigenous. I am gay. What else? And I'm 46. And I'll be 47 very soon. Also, I live here in Rochester, New York. And now I'll pass it on to Robin. You go first.
Hello, everyone. So nice to see all of you. Thank you for having me here. I am in this BIPOC panel. I'm honored to be here and thank you for inviting me. My name is Robin Cheng, and this is my name sign. I also live in Rochester, New York. I didn't know we lived in the same city, Gerald. I'm 59. Next month, I will become the big 6-0. Seriously, I still feel like my heart is young and strong. And sometimes, yeah, I forget my age, but I will be 60. I identify as a lesbian, queer. ABC, American-born Chinese person. Yeah, and I will pass it on to the next person.
Suzette.
Hello, thank you for having me here. My heart is genuinely filled to be here with you all. It's important for you all to know that you are not alone. My name is Suzette. My sign name is like this, or like this, either one. I am originally, I was born in California, San Francisco specifically, but I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm here with my wife of 33 years.
33, wow.
And it's important to recognize that long-term relationships are possible. Definitely requires a lot of work though. A little bit about my background. I wear several hats. I am deaf. I am BIPOC. I am Latinx. I have Mexican in my one side of my family, as well as indigenous peoples in my family. And we use these sign names as well for my indigenous tribe. I identify as both lesbian and she, related with my family and my culture and strong religion. And so I want to respect my family and how they view me. And that's only with family, that they don't necessarily accept me as lesbian. And so I do accept she from my family. Growing up with that identity of having she. Also, I prefer to identify as trans, but I've never had a successful transition. And I am a lesbian. And so I consider myself as having masculine energy inside as well. My behavior, my physical aspect, my appearance, the clothes that I wear, how I work and how I relate with people tends to be on the male side. But there are several intersectional identities I have to acknowledge as well. And that my relationships vary based on the people. I am a psychologist. And so I work with very young children and their families. And sometimes I don't openly share my identities with them. Oh. So typically I identify myself based on moments in my life, because I cannot shape myself into one identity. It's just impossible for me. And so I like to get the respect of all people, period. So thank you so much for inviting me to be involved today. My heart is with you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Suzette. All right, Christopher. Hi. My name is Christopher Smith, and this is my sign name. And why? Because I love any and everything related to the arts, dance, poetry, anything related to the arts. So that's why my sign name is this. As far as my identity, I am queer and male, but queer. I'm old school, you know? I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, and then I moved to California, I think about 10 years ago. And the reason why I moved to California is because I have health issues. I have multiple sclerosis, MS. Before I had MS, I used to be a professional dancer. Until I was diagnosed with MS. and other health issues, and and that really changed my life. And so this is not a negative against MS. I understand that everything happens for a reason, so it's something that I grew to accept. Am I missing something? Did I miss it? How old are you? Oh, thank you, Gerald. I am 57. But I am so proud to be a part of this. It's so rare, especially with so much diversity. It's so inspirational. So, I mean, wow, we're
Yes.
growing. And I think that's pretty much it. Did I cover everything? Thank you so much again. And yes, Suzette, you can go ahead.
Oh, I just want to add my age. I forgot to add my age. I'm young. I'm 57. I'm
Okay then.
58.
Okay then.
And so my wife is 72. So it's important to know about older lesbian relationship couples. We've been married for a long time. We've had a sustaining relationship. And so my wife is older than I. I just wanted to add that.
Wow, that's beautiful. This is Gerald. Wow. You all hit a lot of points in your introduction, and we're going to ask you to elaborate on that throughout this panel today. So I want to thank Suzette for, letting us know about her relationship. And a sustainable relationship is very possible. Right now, I'm currently single, and so you gave me a little sprinkle of hope. So now we're going to go on to the next question. And it's 5 minutes for each, or whoever feels comfortable. And the question relates to your coming out story. The old sign was this for coming out, and I used that because I thought it would be a sign that you all would recognize, but nowadays these young kids are using this sign for coming out. So tell a little bit about how you came out, how old you were, who'd you come out to, just a little bit more in-depth context. Inquiring minds want to know. Who wants to go first?
We have 5 minutes.
Ish.
Okay. Anyone else want to volunteer?
Go ahead, Suzette.
Okay. So for me, my coming out was in the 70s, 80s. At that time in the 80s, we had just been spreading this sentiment that it's okay to be lesbian. Before that time period, many lesbians were in the closet. We would figure out where to meet and where to socialize, and typically that would be in bars or in private homes. And they would be secretive, right? We would get together and socialize, eat, chat, share laughs. So in the 80s, the youth at that time was like, the apartheid was happening. And so during that time in the 80s, more and more people were starting to protest that. And there was more recognition of lesbians, gay people, and the like. And so back then, I was really going through a phase of self-analysis of who I am. I had had some experiences seeing lesbians in movies, for example, or runners and competing. Yes, yes, you're right. You're right, Robin, the best. And I was so fascinated by that. Before then, I never had the language for LGBTQ. We didn't really know that language until much later. When we saw people protesting, when we saw the different things that were happening in our society, and I felt like it was an opportunity. And I started to gain the courage. Can I go ahead and tell people that I'm lesbian? Will they accept that? And so coming out for me was seeing the world start to shift and change. And I started to recognize that language and what it meant to be LGBTQ, because I was also deaf, right? So we didn't have that language back then because we couldn't hear the conversations that was happening around that topic. So it was very much a self-analysis period for me. I don't know, I didn't know any better. My family and the people around me didn't know much about this topic either, and they didn't talk about it much. It was very much like a hush hush type of thing. And so whether a person was out or not, there were so much gray areas related to this topic of how I came out at that time period. But that was my experience.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Christopher or Robin? Go ahead, Christopher. Growing up was tough. Being Black and gay. Growing up being Black and gay. But I had to conceal it because my mom and my dad, it was during the 70s. And I kept hearing the negative comments about gay and homosexual. Oh, his video went off.
Yes, he went off. He might still be signing.
Okay.
Are you okay, Chris?
My apologies. What was I saying? Mr. Gerald, you were talking about homosexual. Thank you. My father would make comments about, like men, he would make negative comments about it. Men who talk like girls, and there was just so much negativity around it that really made me, go back into my shell. And that was ongoing during my upbringing. But, other people will also make negative comments, and it would just make me even more nervous about it. And they would mock and make fun of, they would look at me. And there was just so much negativity, and it caused so much confusion when I was growing up. But when I got to high school, that's when I decided to come out. Because a friend of mine, it was during, I think my freshman year of high school. He was a deaf Black guy who was gay. And I saw him and I said, I got to connect with him. Like I really, felt that. And I was still didn't feel safe because, you would hear about people getting beat up. It was just so much negative, and the pressure from my family. It was just all of that led to so much confusion until I went to Gallaudet. And I just started to just be exposed more and more just in that environment. I got more education about the subject. It was so interesting. And then when I went home to my family, I started to, rebel a little bit because of the exposure that I had that really helped me. And I told my father, I'm gay. And I told my mom, I'm gay. And they just, they lost it. And it took them a while for them to get used to it. And eventually, they gave in. But then I moved to California recently. And I'm out and proud. It's just I'm more involved with drag queens. I'm just out. I'm really, getting these feelings out and being able to share it. And so that was my experience growing up. So yeah. Next. This is Gerald. Thank you for sharing. You can go ahead, Robin.
Ooh. I remember when I was younger, I thought very differently. I would see boys and how they dressed, and I would love that. I would see men wearing ties, and I wanted to dress the same as them. And this whole concept of lesbian or gay, I didn't think about any of that. I just thought I want to dress like a boy, like a man. I would go to clothing stores and my dad would always bring me to the girls section. And I was just not really, I never felt aligned with that. I always wanted the male clothes. And so that was a big point of contention until there was one outfit that I found. It was a dress, but it had a tie at the top. And so it was our compromise. And my dad accepted that. And so I wore that. And I was so thrilled to be able to use a tie. And yes, I tolerated the skirt part of the outfit, but that was fine. It was our compromise, right? So I did that for many years. And when I got older, I started to feel like more comfortable in male clothing. I would see my friends, and when I got to middle school, I really started to, see this concept of dating or liking a person. And, back in the old days, it was different. We would all play together, like football, for example, but in middle school, those things would change. And so I started to focus more on being a student. I would write reports, I would research different topics, and my teachers noticed that I was very studious. And so my teacher had an idea. And so when I finished my assignments, the teacher would come up and ask me, what's next? What do you want to do next? And so my teacher brought this topic of homosexuals to me. And I remember learning that it means two men. I mean, I was in San Francisco, so we saw these type of things, right? And we would say, oh, those are homosexuals. And we knew what that meant on a surface level. But what it meant beyond that context, I had no idea. And so that was middle school where my teacher asked me to write about this topic. And I thought, that's something different. So I went to the library at the school and looked for different information about homosexuals. And there was nothing there, not enough information. So I went to a public library and I was looking for research on homosexuals, and the librarian asked, homosexuals, you really want to research that? I said, yes. And so she showed me where, and I saw this huge section of homosexual information. There were books, and there was something that said lesbian. I had no idea what that was. Another time, lesbian popped up again. I said, okay, let me just check this out and see what this means. And I was shocked to see two women hugging and kissing in the book. And lesbian, I was like, I don't know what this is. And so I just started to peruse the pages. And I realized two women can be together, just like two men can be gay and together. And so I looked in the dictionary to see what homosexual really meant. And it was an oh moment for me. It blew my mind. I finally understood what it meant and that you can be a lesbian. And so I started wondering, am I like that? Am I a lesbian? And so, I had to check out the books for myself, not necessarily for the research report, but for myself. And I remember going to a parade that was in San Francisco, and there was so much mocking happening and so much negativity and anti-sentiments for gay men marching. And I found that very fascinating. And looking at the people who were mocking, it really surprised me. I didn't understand why they were doing that when we should be unified, right? And that's what made me start to feel like I need to be secretive about my identity. I need to be in the closet because it's not a warm welcome here. And so I would hide the books under my bed and pull them out to read them secretly and carefully. And when movies came out, I felt personal best. I felt inspired. And I had mixed feelings at the same time. Some positive vibes and some negative feelings were there. And so I decided to push those feelings aside and go ahead. And I saw many lesbians there playing instruments. And there was also the deaf community that was mocking them. And I just didn't understand. They're just lesbian musicians. Why are the people mocking them? And so I became private. I didn't want to share who I was to the world. I kept it to myself until the late 70s, more or less. I graduated from high school and I moved and I went to CSUN. And the first week, I felt free. I learned ASL, and there were many people who looked at me and thought I was a lesbian, and I wasn't really out at that time. But people would come up to me, and I was kind of questioning what I should do. And I knew I was attracted to them and I liked them, but I wasn't sure if I should come out and show them who I was. So that was a very, very confusing first week for me, especially being open to ASL. I had grown up orally, and then meeting someone that I was attracted to and I liked, I was just so overwhelmed. But that's when I kind of took my foot out the closet. I still hadn't announced to my parents. And I had started to date some girls. And I really felt like I was finally starting to touch this world that I had been craving for so long. But then I would go back home and I would be depressed. This is not what I want. This isn't who I want to be. I would feel confused, and my parents would question me, what's wrong? What's going on? You can share with us what's wrong. And I just kind of hid that and put it to the side, especially with my mom. She was very inquisitive. And then when she found out, she came up to me and said, "Are you a lesbian?" It kind of put me in a difficult situation, in a tough spot. I wasn't ready to come out. And my mom would say, "Are you? Are you?" And I was just like, what do I do with that? I had mixed feelings. It was a bad start. I didn't appreciate starting that way. And after a while, I just left home. I didn't want to deal with that. And so I went to my grandmother's house and started to share what I was feeling and get some opinions. And so they called my uncle and he visited with me. And this is my favorite uncle. I love him so much. And we would chat, and he would say, you should come to the East Coast. And in my mind, I was like, yes, I can get away from the family. I want to do this. I want to escape. And so we flew out east, and my uncle asked, "Do you know anything about what, grandmother told me?" And I said, "No." And so when we took off, my uncle said to me, "I'm gay." And that just knocked me off my feet. "Really? You're gay?" And my uncle said, "Yes, that's why I'm here to help you." And so we flew from San Francisco to Maryland. And in that trip, I just got so much off my chest, and I became so free and light, and it felt good. And I was so thankful to my uncle for helping me to be able to relieve that burden, right? And so when we got there, I moved out east. Definitely. It was an opportunity to escape and to become 100% open and out, living on the East Coast. And I've been living here so far.
Wow.
Thank you.
That is so touching. Your story, I mean, each of you really, really moved me. I relate with some of you for sure because I was born in 75 and I didn't come out until about 94, 95. But that feeling of awareness started around the 90s, the early 90s. But prior to, I knew I was different because I was looking at, clothing and magazines, and male clothing would catch my eye, but I would look at the face and the shape and the body type, and I would try, that would lead to other things, I never did, the texting, social media thing. My focus was on magazines and that kind of thing. So that actually leads me to my next question related to, you all mentioned homosexuals and homophobia, biphobia, transphobia. How does that impact your life? Because I remember as I was scrolling, I was fearful that my parents would, get on me for looking or, I know at church they mentioned you can't do that, like being gay or lesbian was sin, that wasn't right. And so I would scroll in secret. And so I'm just curious about you all's experiences with homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia, and any other phobia that applies to your personal story during your time. 1 minute each around.
Okay. Go ahead, Suzette. No, go ahead, Robin. Robin saying no, Suzette, take it. Suzette saying, I want to clarify something that's very important. We have two camps. We have white peers and their journeys and their experiences in the deaf community. And then we have the BIPOC, cultures, experiences, etc. And in the 60s and 70s, we did not have a lot of integration with the white communities. Often I feel I see my friends and my BIPOC peers, and they were lonely and they felt very much in private, keeping to their group, not a lot of opportunities to see and interact with the white peers, because many BIPOC families and cultures, they wanted to cherish those aspects of their identity, which meant they felt forced to stay within those groups and those knowledge bases. And so their first experience is shared among those individuals. So when I first came out, I do admit it was to my sister. At that time, my parents would have forbidden that. It was impossible to tell my parents that. So that happened much later. I did come out to my sister first because I knew that my sister could protect me better than I could protect myself. It was an added layer that I was deaf and the only deaf person in my family of all hearing family members. So we didn't have communication, we didn't have sign language. And so for many years, I was dwelling within my own thoughts. And I didn't share that except with my sister. And so my sister knew at a very young age and told me, I know you're different. And I was uncertain, different how? And my sister would say, you're different from the other girls. You want to be a boy. You're more like a boy. And inside, I knew I wanted to be a boy. But back then, we couldn't be boys. We had a choice to be lesbian or to become a nun. And that's it. No, thank you. I was not into that church thing like that. And so there was no other options that I could see or understand. And so I was alone for a long time. I stayed to myself. Being trans today, you can be identified early, 3 years old. You can identify yourself. And those kids at 3, they know already, about wanting to be a female or a male. And it was hard for me because I felt like I had to pick to be a lesbian, to love a woman like a woman. But inside, I was a boy that liked girls. And so that wasn't until later that I realized that I was a man who loved women. But lesbian was an identity I accepted by force because I feel I didn't have a choice. And nowadays, people ask me, will you transition to become man? And I say, I'm already accepting this identity, how I am in my body. And so I feel like I'm older now, I'm wiser now. It's too late for that for me, but I accept who I am. My wife was actually a nun. She was married in a church. And we both looked at each other one day and we were like, wait a minute, we like each other, we have boobs, it's okay, it's fine. So that was our choice back then. Younger people now have more options than we did back then.
Wow. Did you want to say something, Robin?
I'm thinking about Suzette's comment, and I feel similarly. When I was growing up, I felt natural as a boy. Even gay men would come up to me and I would say, I'm a lesbian. And they would say, oh, I thought you were a boy. And so being in Seattle and being in Texas, they would say, hi, sir. Hey, sir, over and over, Mr. I'm used to that because internally I feel like I'm a boy. I don't worry about those kind of things. One time I went out on a date with my girlfriend and I was dressed like a boy. And everyone assumed that I was a guy. And so it was easy. It was nice. As I got older, I noticed more feminine features showing up when I went out. For example, my boobs got bigger, maybe, or the way I walked. Um, and I really didn't like that, how those changes affected me, but I accepted it. I accepted it. I'm older now, and it's easy with my age to just go with it. But that aside, homophobia and the comment about that, I think in general there's just this phobia of, we have to educate them that we're all human. There's nothing wrong with being homosexual. We just have to educate them. Christopher.
So, homophobia, in my experience with it growing up, and it made me uncomfortable because it's true. Black men in the community tend to be on the down low. Because I grew up with one guy, and that guy knew my family, and I knew his family. We grew up together. But the two of us, well, that guy was hearing, but there was one thing missing. There was no romance. It was just sex. It was just sex and only sex. But that's not what I wanted. And there was something that was missing. And he was, what we call down low. What's the sound for down low? Down low. And so that was a down low experience for me. But when I went to Gallaudet taught me how to to be more, to romance a person and all things that encompass. And so for me, it was a little, it was a little different. It took a minute for me to adjust. It was a lot to take in. I had to reevaluate relationships and really like recalibrate and what love, and look for love, and not only, you know. So it was interesting. Yeah. And I'm still struggling with that. But that's the main reason that I moved to California, to be my own person. So, yeah, this is Gerald. Did you want to say something, Robin? Go ahead, Robin.
I just want to add one thing, something I forgot to mention. That one time when I went to CSUN, there was about 5 of us, and we decided to set up kind of a new LGBTQ thing back then, you know, just a small group of 5 of us. And there was a hearing person that was explaining, and we had an interpreter there present. And so we were watching the interpreter, but the interpreter was, homophobic. The way the interpreter was signing and the facial expressions they were making. And we were just like, come on, stop it. Sign gay, sign lesbian, stop with this homosexual sign and these facial expressions. And so we were becoming upset, like, cut it out. We were tired of that behavior. I can never forget that.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's such a good point. As you mentioned, like letting people know to stop using, that sign for homosexual, homophobic. Yeah, like that. I remember that back in the day. And as you mentioned, and Suzette mentioned, choices. Back in the day, we felt like we didn't have choices. But now I'm seeing kids are saying we have choices, we have options. And as Christopher mentioned about down low men, yeah, I was involved in different organizations and I would hear different things as it relates to, interpreter sharing and men sharing about their experiences, their down low experiences. And all of those stories were very heavy. They were very heavy topics. And so of course that leads to the next question as it relates to the generation nowadays, our current youth. What would be your perception of the youth and the LGBTQ community that has options compared to all the things that you all mentioned? How has those things changed your perspective of how LGBTQ people in the community, especially the youth, them having the ability to come out more easily earlier than we did? So what is your response to that, Suzette?
Again, I wear several different hats, right? So I will share about my personal perceptions and then my professional perceptions as a psychologist who works with young children. On a personal level, my perceptions and experiences are, if it was not for the youth today, to feel very confident and very strong about their identities, I myself would not have become comfortable being a lesbian and being okay about being a lesbian. Because back then I didn't have a choice. I had to be secretive or experience criticism, mocking, bullying, and the like. Those were negative experiences that were a lot more frequent in occurrence compared to today. Now, young children can come out at 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I deal with the parents explaining what their child's needs are and needing those parents to be flexible, because the science is different than what we had back then. Back then, there was more potential for contracting diseases, more harm, potential for violence. So different things, right, that we experienced back then. Today's youth, they have more different kinds of science protection, we can say, against experimentation, trans bodies and feelings. So what we experienced back then with science was completely different than what they're experiencing today. Today is more self-experimentation, where the youth today can have more opportunities to have options, and be respected in their ability to grow and become themselves and who they want to identify as. Back then, you chose either this or that, and there is no in between. There is no opportunity for gray areas to figure out who you are. You are forced to fit in one camp, and you're stuck with that choice. So I feel stronger, the youth in this time, I have more respect for them. And if not for them, I wouldn't be able to be in my strong lesbian identity that I am today. The youth now have a different kind of problem. They're experiencing more political rights type of issues related to their choices, related to being open and out. Sometimes there is some ego and entitlement, right? I have a right to be lesbian, I have a right to be gay, I have a right to be trans. But back then we did not have that. So it's hard to find that balance between the elders and the youth of today. Because again, it feels like separate camps. And we have not yet figured out how to bridge our experiences in the middle between those two camps.
Whew. Wow. Did anyone want to add? Or we can go on to the next question. Christopher, did you want to add? Yeah, it's just one thing. I just want to tell you something. It's funny. Once I found out about LGBTQ and I was aware of the different varieties, and since living in California and seeing it all, it was really interesting. You know, remember, I'm from Chicago. I'm an old head from Chicago. I'm the same person, but when, sometimes sometimes they'll say, oh, I saw you on Facebook and you were in drag and blah, blah, blah. And like, why are you acting that way? Why are you acting like a girl? And my answer would be like, oh, I love it. Oh, it was so fabulous. And they would be like, oh, you changed. And I say, yes, I have. And I love it. Say that again. And they were just like, they don't know they don't know what to say. And so I know who I am. And it's been interesting. Growing up, now I know who I am. And so I wanted to share that with you all. This is Gerald. So in other words, you mean you didn't have the opportunity to, speak up like you can now. Christopher says, exactly. Gerald, as a child, you had to hide or conceal or your identity or be secretive until you were old enough to be who you are openly and freely. And nobody can run you. Nobody can tell you what to do. I mean, that is really just amazing. Because nowadays, the youth can be themselves. They can be whoever and whatever they want to be. They can wear whatever they want to wear without, someone telling them, no, you can't do X, Y, and Z. And so now I'm seeing a lot of young people being themselves. Back in the day, back in my day, I wish I had that opportunity. But just by listening to you all and your stories, it's got me thinking. I mean, it was bad, yeah, but it was a good experience. And that's something that we can teach our youth about their lives now. Because right now, the youth is very, there's some angst there, yes, but where are the supporters? And so that leads to the next question related to the LGBTQ deaf organizations. Oh, did you want to say something, Suzette?
I think Robin wanted
Oh, I'm
to
so
make a
sorry,
comment.
Robin. I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Robin.
Well,
Go ahead, Robin. You can go ahead. Did you want to add?
I'm just thinking back in my time. I think in our time, it was a little fun to be secretive and doing your dirt on the down low. I mean, I really enjoyed that. Saying, oh, okay, yeah, you're gay. Oh, yeah, I'm lesbian. Oh, at this time, I'm going to be straight. So it was more of our secretive communications that were happening back then. But today, everything is just out in the open. It doesn't matter. So it's a different kind of feeling. Back in our time, it was a lot more adventurous. Suzette saying, I agree.
So with all of this change that has happened, I was mentioning earlier about, language deprivation, not really having the language to talk about these subjects, not really knowing who we are and our identities and how do we get that support system, and just getting a support system in and of itself was challenging. And so I'm wanting to know, as it relates to LGBTQ organizations, one that was founded in 1977. It's called the Rainbow Alliance of the Deaf. I didn't join that alliance until later in life. I'm pretty sure some states still have a chapter and some have since closed or shut down. But I'm just guessing you don't even need it because everyone's just out and free at this point. But that change that has taken place from 1977 to present day, what's that support like? What is it like to have deaf LGBTQ organizations supporting you? Go ahead, Suzette.
I'm trying to figure out the best way
Oh, I'm so
to
sorry.
discuss this.
My apologies. I wanted to add racism in the
Yes,
mix.
that exactly. So, all right, the Rainbow Alliance, thinking about its history and how they got together back then and the diversity that was in the group or lack of, we have to remember that that organization was very much ingrained with white people and ran by white people, and that they did not accept BIPOC deaf people at that time until much later. But we were ignored, we were oppressed by our own RAD. And that's an unfortunate negative experience. The vice president of RAD at that time supported those behaviors. Now there's more acceptance of people of color, but we don't see enough of those BIPOC deaf individuals leading RAD or having power. So it is better. My experience related to support is that that organization was very invested in me removing my culture. The only way I could be accepted was through my deaf and signing identities. But even then, the style was very white. It was very ASL, but we BIPOC people don't have that option. We grew up in our communities, in mainstream schools with hearing partners because we were not accepted by the deaf
Yes,
RAD.
yes, 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 yes.
And so we didn't have our choice. Our communication styles, our learning was very much oral based. We learned some signs. And so without that collaboration with them, we were never accepted fully because of our communication styles, because of the way we signed. And we still needed to belong in our larger BIPOC hearing communities, right? And we still had to be in these national hearing LGBTQ organizations because of what we were experiencing way back then related to access. So we had that barrier as well. The youth don't want to be in hearing organizations. They want to be in deaf organizations. But how can we have the best of both worlds? I can't go in and be invited unless I throw off my BIPOC side to enter into those spaces and those systems. So I have to make a choice. And I tend to choose to stay in my BIPOC circles. We deaf BIPOC individuals have different experiences and different needs. And we don't often join RAD or the larger white deaf LGBTQ organizations because we are not fully accepted. But we get blamed for not supporting them. But they have not yet figured out how to come to our turf, how to be in our backyard, how to support us in our whole selves. And so there's a lot of divisiveness in that aspect, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm curious, Robin.
I think my experience is different because I unfortunately have not really been involved with RAD. I think I went for fun once, and what I saw was that something was off, that I did not fit. And so I didn't really go that often. There were a lot more males than lesbians there. I did notice that. The Deaf Lesbian Festival, when that started, that was very fun. And at the end, it just fizzled out. The last Lesbian Deaf Festival, I volunteered. And there was one person, I can't remember their last name, Marsha, who asked me to participate in a cruise because I own a business, Deaf World Travel. And so they wanted to have deaf lesbians to join this cruise. And I thought, okay, it's the Lesbian Deaf Festival. Have a deaf lesbian vacation. That seems like a good idea to host that and have something we can all enjoy. But there was so much politics involved, and we could put that aside and just have deaf lesbians involved. So I did participate with Deaf Lesbian Pride and that community. And at the time, I was helping with a few things. And as I got older, my attention just shifted to other things. So that has been my experience.
This is Christopher. I want to share as it relates to racism. I definitely went through that as well. And I remember it was at Gallaudet University. All of my friends were white. They were gay. And I was just behind just because of the language. And something was missing. I mean, I was just wanting to be a part of those spaces. I just couldn't find where I fit. And even my black gay deaf circle, and it was a small circle, even them, they would say like, it was just this, why are you hanging out with white people? It was just this thing. It was coming from me from both sides. And I felt stuck in the middle, but I wanted to share that experience as well. This is Gerald. Yes, I remember a situation related to, the whole Oreo thing. They called me an Oreo. They were like, which one are you? Are you black or are you white? And I was like, I'm both. I like my white friends and I also like my black friends. But sometimes, there's pros and cons to both sides. And it came down to how I wanted to lead my life. At the same time, it's really sad that you have to pick sides, essentially, to neglect one to be with the other and vice versa. You know what I mean? but that's something that happens to everyone in the world. You have to really pick your own path, essentially. But at the same time, you have to respect yourself. You have to respect others. We definitely can talk about this ad nauseum, but I want to shift the conversation a little bit. I think that I'm a little closer to, your age, because I'll be 50 very soon, a few years. But it hadn't hit me yet. Aging, the concept of aging and getting older. Your body starts to change, how you fit in the world as all these changes are transpiring. You start to see all the beauty of the younger generation coming out, being themselves earlier, knowing that you didn't have that opportunity. And maybe you have an internal struggle, oh, I want to come out and I want to be bold and be loud, but maybe I might not fit in, or maybe I'll not be accepted. Do you also have that feeling, or do you just say, bump it? Christopher? It's the perfect topic. Right now, 57, and I live in my own apartment, and I'm my whole self. But at the same time, it's a little bit lonely, I gotta say. Just gotta be honest and throw that out there. I'm lonely. I'm who I am, but when I go out, I'm having to code switch. I'm having to change and adapt here and adapt there, and it's just for most of the time. Well, especially with COVID, that amplified the loneliness like you wouldn't imagine.
I
So yeah,
completely understand.
Suzette.
I agree with you, Christopher. I see more today a tendency, a need, how do I spell that? Trendy, a hunger for this formal style of look at me, look at me. And this is evident in the selfie world. Look at me, me. Now, as I'm older, I'm seeing that that trend is really ingrained in come over to my home, come over, let's eat together, let's watch a movie together, let's chat about politics or finances. We're older, we're wiser, planning vacations together. That's our trend. But this youth, oh my, they're so focused on themselves. They want what's best for themselves. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is they tend to ignore us, the elders who have the history, who have this rich history, and the youth don't care about that. They don't care about the past. But it's important to know the past because today I feel we're going a little backwards. They are getting their rights taken away. They're being murdered and bullied and deprived of things, and they are not yet realizing that there's a whole world of us, older, wiser people who are ready to help push them forward and to be in solidarity with them so that we can all advance together. We're so divided right now, the youth and the elderly.
Right. Definitely. Robin, did you want to say something?
I had a thought and then I forgot. Maybe that's because of my age. Oh, we were talking about just go ahead. I'll remember it soon.
Okay. Okay. I mean, this is definitely getting heavy, and I'm trying to, lighten things up a bit.
That's a thought.
So nowadays, with the youth and the LGBTQ community, what do you want to tell them? What do you think that they take for granted? I'm not sure of the sign for that, but what do you think the youth takes for granted nowadays? And maybe you can add, if you had to come out all over again, what are some of the things you wish you had known, that you wish you
About
had
trans
for a
people.
better opportunity to change who you are? Would you have changed even more? Inquiring minds want to know.
Yes, I definitely
Let's let
would be a
Robin go.
man.
Well, Suzette,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Robin.
I agree with Suzanne. I
Okay, go ahead,
definitely would
Suzette.
would be a man. I definitely would be a man. And I would not be in the LGBTQ community because I would be a straight man married to a woman. But I am a member of the LGBTQ community. That's my history. That's my experience. And I wish the youth felt that they can come to us, that they can be in solidarity with us. It's not often that we get to come to you and be in solidarity with you. We want you to come to us because we have a wealth of history that we're ready to give you some guidance on some things. And most people think that older LGBTQ people are boring or it's the same old, or they have nothing new to share, and all these other sentiments. But we have a lot to make you feel that you are worthy. And maybe the youth might be asking themselves, will I be married one day? Can I have a sustainable long marriage with open communication? And that's key, right? Open communication for any long-term relationship. How to tell their parents, how to come out to their parents. Maybe they're questioning that. And maybe inside they're feeling like they have a need that's not met externally. And they will become older and they will look back and they will wonder, why did I not ask the LGBTQ elders who came before me?
Wow, that is an amazing message.
Role models.
You're right, but before you two go ahead, I want to let you know. I want to let all of the viewers know that you can go ahead and put your questions in the chat. If you have any burning thoughts or burning questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box, please, and they will be passed along to Drago, and he will then pass them along to me for me to ask these panelists today. And while we wait for more questions to come in, either Robin or Christopher, I don't know if you all wanted to share something. This is Christopher. Yes, yes. I know it may be a little off topic, but I do want to say something. My parents are now more fully accepting. You have gay rights and marriage and all of the things that are happening right now. All of that led to my parents' perspective changing. And I just wish that that had taken place a long time ago. And I know it's not their fault, everything that transpired between us. When I grew up, all of that stuff I internalized, and I didn't have that awareness, and they didn't have that awareness either. Why they question why am I acting this way? and they responded the only way they knew how. And now, I'm quote unquote a senior citizen at this point, and my parents are even older than I am. They're in their 80s, and they're just very smiley and accepting of me, and ask for forgiveness, and they forgive me and I forgive them, and it's just been an experience and an amazing exchange. And I just wanted to share that with you all this evening.
Yes, I understand. If I could go back and start all over again, I would go through transition to be a man. And being in the LGBTQ community, I would support them, but I feel like I'm different. I meet so many different people, and I don't have to follow the white world or a straight world or religion. I would be more open. I'm open. I'm happy and comfortable, and I wouldn't want any more of that discomfort with who we are. We don't need any more of that.
Wow. I'm getting a little emotional here as it relates to that question, because it's something that, back in our time, we struggled with. We had to fight, we had to protest, we had to march, we had to really make what we're living today happen. We had to lay that groundwork. And it took a long time to get to where we are today. And now we're here. We have marriage rights. Kids are able to be who they are, but we still have yet to, catch up with the young crowd. We're still not all the way there yet. We have our celebrations, but at the same time, it's more like, okay, I feel like I have to catch up with the young people, the young crowd. You know what I mean? It's just wow. I just can't imagine what happened before I was born, what those years look like. I just can't even fathom it. But now I want to ask, who are your LGBTQ role models? Who are yours? Who did you lean on for acceptance? And the reason why I'm asking that question is, I know it's a very sensitive question, is because we've already had so many deaths as it related to suicide. And some of those people may not have had someone to look up to or lean on or to pour into them, or that rejection was so overwhelming for them that they couldn't go on and they couldn't continue to be LGBTQ. And so I'm curious to know who your role models were. Christopher, I have two role models, two people that I looked up to, and we lost them. They were Black, deaf, and gay. One deaf guy, gay guy, his name was Casey Perkins. It was my first exposure to Black, deaf, gay. He was an artist himself. But prior to Carrie, it was Kelvin Coleman, and he was from Chicago as well. And he unfortunately was murdered by a fool in Chicago. And that was both Black, deaf, gay males. Growing up, I looked up to both of them, and they will forever be in my heart and spirit. This is Gerald. Thank you. Wow. Robin or Suzette?
I don't really have any deaf role models, but I do know when I was very young, my favorite cartoon or comic book, there was Wonder Woman. And that's who I looked up to. I could read those comics all day. Just seeing that she was not afraid, she was ready to fight and stand up for herself. And that was who I liked. I wanted to be like her. She was wonderful. Secondly, a role model would probably be Drago. I do look up to Drago. Very good spirit, positive heart, and just I applaud Drago. Suzette saying, well, I have a few embarrassing and mixed feelings about this. Drago, are you here? Just I'm laughing.
Can you say it again?
Drago, a while back, um, during transition. So I knew that person back then, the first deaf person that I looked up to, and later became a man. And it's still in my heart. I hold that person. I do, because we have shared, I believe Drago is here. We have shared personal connection, being Latinx, both of us. And that's something deeper. Um, we are peers. And Drago was my first deaf model back then. And so when I look back at that time period, for most of us who are BIPOC, that is a huge part of our experience. We have a different connection compared to our white peers. And often I see my white peers, they go to different events where they have music, and they tend to ignore the performers, and they're in their own corner just signing to one another. But we BIPOC, when we go to different events with music, we want to see the damn dance. We want to see the damn signs. So we have different experiences in our relationship to music. I never technically had a role model, but I really love a music group back then. I don't know if you know the group name. They're called Sweet Honey on the Rocks.
Of course. I'm old school too. I'm old school too,
Yes.
definitely.
Yes, I looked up to them. They were lesbian, they were diverse. That was my first group that I looked up to. And I felt that I wasn't alone. As a person of color, I'm not alone. But again, not many experiences out and having connection with people. So I don't really have other role models.
And now that brings us to our last question related to AIDS and COVID, the COVID pandemic. Are they similar to the three of you? Or were they similar experiences? I mean, I've never experienced the AIDS pandemic myself, but the AIDS epidemic myself, but I know people who have AIDS and who have passed, well, maybe not died, but I heard that they have passed through friends of friends. But my circle of friends who are HIV positive are still living, and they are living longer because of course, advancements in medicine and technology and the healthcare industry, awareness and knowledge of said change. But comparing the COVID pandemic and the AIDS HIV epidemic, do you see them as parallel?
Yes.
This is Christopher. It's interesting. This HIV and COVID. HIV was more, you were still able to interact, but with COVID, everything was locked down, shut down. It was separated, isolation, point blank, period. And so that's what I'm thinking.
You mean AIDS? We're talking about AIDS? I'm trying to remember back then. back in the 1980s and 90s, and it was just starting to spread, right? This concept of AIDS. I didn't fully understand. I saw some things and also being in denial and thinking about it being connected to the gay world and how it was happening and spreading. And straight people were kind of distancing themselves from, me and gay people. And I was like, I'm innocent, I'm lesbian, I'm not a guy. That's a guy thing. So there was a lot of misunderstanding and confusion about that. I had a really good friend. Um, he's from South America, from Colombia, who came to help me, and we became roommates, very good friends. And one day asked, do you want to go out together? And so when he came home once, he was crying and saying, I have it, I have it. And I said, what's wrong? What do you have? He said, I have HIV. He said, I'm HIV positive. And I said, what does it mean? Are you going to die? And he said, no. I mean, there was just so many things we didn't understand and we didn't know, and we were overwhelmed. And we tried to find out information online, and there was a lot of communication breakdown with that. And so when we finally did get one, that was an awful experience to find out research and figure out how to navigate that. And now, over 30 years later, he's still alive. He's still here. He's taken very good care of himself. I'm very proud of him for how he's cared for himself. I'm proud of him. While I've seen other people who have died because they haven't taken care of themselves and they just did not care. But I see him, he really values himself. Whereas other people, like my mom, would have negative comments and say, oh, those homosexual people. Her comments were very homophobic.
Go ahead, Suzette.
If I can add just a few comments, there are two big differences between AIDS at that time, because there was no education and there was no access and no resources, which is unfortunate, in contrast with COVID right now, where we have so much more access, so much more education, and more resources available. My experience back then with the AIDS epidemic was horrific. It was a horrific experience, seeing my deaf brothers just passing away so frequently and saying their names. There were so many deaf brothers that died. So that was a different kind of grief. Whereas with this pandemic, I'm so happy to see the youth having access and education. And education can still be a problem about this pandemic because many deaf people are not getting a full understanding and appreciation of why it's important to be aware of the pandemic. Many have false information. Back then, we had no information until you became sick. And that's when you became sick, you were often ignored and left to die alone. So there's no comparison between the two, in my opinion. Back then was a completely different time.
Yes. So right now, we of course have run out of time, and I really want to thank you again. We can talk about this for days, and I wish we can have a part two because there's so much that we can talk about, but maybe in the future that can happen. But again, this is a world problem. Back during AIDS, I didn't really look at it as a global problem. It was more of a gay issue, and straight people have HIV as well and get HIV and AIDS as well. And there's definitely a difference between the AIDS epidemic and the COVID pandemic. I'm definitely sure of that. And if you want to learn more about that, You can Google, as Suzette said, there's a lot more accessible information present day compared to back in the day, because back then we didn't have technology, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so now we have access to technology and we're able to learn on demand about health, mental health, different diagnoses. We get to learn about relationships and how to have healthy relationships, healthy dialogue and conversations, and the like. And all of that, with all of that, do any of you have any last, comments, parting words that you would like to share, last contributions to the conversation? Christopher? This is Christopher. I would like to say, I tip my hat to all of you. You all have done an amazing job, and you have done an amazing job hosting, Gerald. Beautifully done. Thank you so much, Gerald. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's all.
Robinson, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you again. This is a celebration for BIPOC and elderly people of the LGBTQ deaf community. Again, support each other, especially our youth. Don't feel afraid to lean on and lean into the elderly community. Listen to the stories. They have a wealth of information to share. Your mom, grandparents, uncles, aunties, all of them.
Yes, we do.
We wish you all the best, and we want the best for the young LGBT community. And we want the celebration to continue to be yourself and just love, inspire, and be beautiful.
I'm so happy to be here.
And thank you so much for being here.
Bye now.
Goodbye, everyone. This is Christopher. Bye.
Nice to meet you all as well. Take care.
Nice to meet you all. Nice to meet all three of you all, says Joe.